Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Susan Ilian. At least 2 people have been killed in shelling. That's according to Ukrainian authorities in Vovchansk, a town on the border with Russia and close to where Russian partisans said they had captured several Russian soldiers during a cross-border raid. Residents said 2 women were killed when shells exploded in front of their homes. There were pools of blood on the ground. A pro-Ukraine group of Russian partisans said it had captured several soldiers during a cross-border raid into southern Russia and would hand them over to Ukrainian authorities. The Russian Volunteer Corps made the claim in a video statement released on Telegram in the wake of a raid into the Russian region of Belgorod. The group, along with fighters from the Freedom of Russia Legion, has claimed responsibility for a spate of attacks inside Russian territory, including last week when Moscow said 2 civilians were killed during fighting. Ukraine denies direct involvement in the cross-border attacks, but has cast them as a consequence of Russia's invasion. Russian Defense Ministry says its forces have thwarted a major Ukrainian offensive in the southern Ukrainian region of Donetsk and killed hundreds of pro-Kyiv troops. In a statement, the ministry said Ukraine had launched the attack over the weekend using 6 mechanized and 2 tank battalions. There was no immediate comment from Ukraine. It was unclear whether the reported attack represented the start of a long-expected Ukrainian counteroffensive to recapture some of the territory taken by Russian forces after the invasion of February 2022. The ministry said Russian forces killed 250 Ukrainian troops, as well as destroying 16 tanks, the infantry fighting vehicles, and 21 armored combat vehicles. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia was using a network of suppliers to evade international sanctions designed to prevent it from making missiles and other weapons. In a video address, Zelensky said unnamed countries and companies were helping Russia acquire technology with the emphasis on producing missiles. Russia has launched hundreds of missiles against Ukrainian targets since last October. In April, a senior Zelensky aide said Ukrainian forces were finding a growing number of components from China in Russian weapons used in Ukraine as Western supplies are squeezed by sanctions. China has denied sending military equipment to Russia. Mr. Zelensky also said Russia's war has killed at least 500 Ukrainian children since it started more than 15 months ago. Zelensky provided the number hours after rescue workers found the body of a 2-year-old girl who died in one of the latest Russian strikes. The Ukrainian military has renewed its plea for operational silence around a long-awaited counteroffensive against Russian forces, the latest in a stream of messages by Kyiv as it prepares for the assault. Anticipation has mounted around what is expected to be a broad attack by Ukrainian forces to retake Russian-occupied territory in the east and south. But Ukrainian officials have repeatedly discouraged public speculation over the operation, saying it could help the enemy. Authorities in recent days have also cracked down on citizens sharing images or footage of air defense systems shooting down Russian missiles. The ministry said plans love silence. There will be no announcement of the start of the counteroffensive. The sleeky-produced footage featured masked and well-armed frontline troops holding their fingers against their lips, gesturing for silence amid the distant rumble of artillery and gunfire. Meanwhile, Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Volodymyr Vyravlovsky says Ukraine's plans for a counteroffensive against Russian occupation remain on track despite an unprecedented wave of missile and drone attacks across the country in recent weeks. He said Ukraine had faced repeated volleys of ballistic missiles in May, especially in urban centers, including the capital, Kyiv. Gavrilov called Russia's heavy use of ballistic missiles in May a last strategic resort, amid noted that his country's air defense systems had been more than 90% effective against the attacks.
We experienced a lot of missile launches from Russia in May especially. I see it is primary goal of this to stop our counteroffensive, not to allow us to concentrate on our efforts on that, and also to target, as Russian calls, decision-making centers in Ukraine. So it was unprecedented missile use during the May.
On the Ukrainian airframe will be an addition of...
And for them, for Russia, it was a huge surprise to find that the effectiveness of that is almost zero against modern air defense systems which we received from our partners.
Were you with Ukraine surprised with
They have a stress in the society as well. They have many people who are not support what is going on. Of course, we have a lot of people inside Russia who support Ukraine, and in this environment, we can see a lot of events which I think will be on the rise because we are in the highest point of the war, of the conflict.
What are your impressions of the discussion?
First of all, we would like to have a very clear roadmap for Ukraine to join the NATO. Not just the confirmation that the door is open, but there are clear, actual set of steps to be done by both sides for Ukraine to join the NATO. The second, we are looking for having kind of guarantees on this transition period when Ukraine is still not the member, but is on the way. So we will expect some guarantees of our security to be provided.
Keeping troops should patrol the zone. What is your response to that?
We are not going to negotiate any deal which related to the loss of our territories. So we have to liberate all occupied territories, including Crimea.
Established as part of a peace proposal, and that UN peace...
We understand the role and place of China as well in this regard. And so we are interested in having direct communication with Chinese military and leadership on our case. And we are grateful that China appointed the special envoy just to be in touch with us. So we want to engage with everybody in this world, just explaining the roots of our war, explaining our mission and ambition, and of course accusing the aggressor. This war demonstrated that there are still dangers in this world.
In the meantime, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said that equipment and training provided to Ukraine was strictly to be used in defense of their sovereign territory. Now, the Pentagon chief acknowledged that tracking how weapons and other military systems are being used was difficult, but expressed confidence in Ukraine. Austin also said he would leave it for the Ukrainians to describe its military operations, as Russia said it had thwarted a major offensive in the Ukrainian region of Donetsk.
A lot of people on it. In terms of describing any potential Ukrainian operations, I would defer to the Ukrainian leadership to do that. I mean, I'm sure they'll at the right time talk about or explain exactly where they are in their preparation and their execution of any planned offensive. You asked the question about the defenses that the Ukrainians might encounter. It's been widely reported that Russia has constructed defenses along the border of the occupied territory, and those defenses in many cases are defenses in depth, so we see several lines of fortifications, ditches, dragon's teeth, prepared positions, those kinds of things. Now, that's so in some cases it's a fairly significant preparation there. But I would say that they have to defend against a pretty significant, across a pretty significant area. So, they probably can't be strong, in every place. So it's incumbent upon the Ukrainians to find those points of advantage where they can leverage and exploit. So we'll see what happens.
Ukraine was high on the agenda in talks between Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Poland's Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki in Toronto. Now, Poland has positioned itself as one of Kyiv's loyal allies, playing a leading role in persuading sometimes reluctant allies to provide it with heavy weaponry, much of it supplied through Poland. Canada has also been a strong backer, providing military support to Ukrainian troops who are receiving training in Poland.
At the top of our agenda was the Kremlin's brutal and unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine, which has redrawn the security landscape of Europe after decades of peace and prosperity. 1 million Canadians claim Polish heritage, and 500,000 of them live here in Ontario. Canada and Poland are working together to train members of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Canadian Armed Forces members are in Poland right now, training them through Operation Unifier, Canada's training mission that since 2015 has trained over 36,000 Ukrainians. Poland is also where CAF members have been training Ukrainians to operate Leopard 2 tanks. Earlier this year, we deployed Canadian Armed Forces members to support a Polish-led advanced medical skills training program for Armed Forces of Ukraine personnel. And just last week, we deployed more CAF trainers as part of a new round of military support to Ukraine.
Over the past year and a half, the world has become sharply polarized, and Russia has contributed to this enormously. And in that context, it's worth emphasizing that transatlantic cooperation has assumed the importance it has had during the Cold War. Poland and Poles and my government, we are deeply involved in supporting Ukraine. First on the military front, in terms of military equipment and organizing weapon delivery through our major hub in Rzeszów, southeastern part of Poland. We started the Leopard Tanks Coalition. And yesterday in Chisinau, Moldova, I spoke to several prime ministers from the European Union and President Volodymyr Zelensky about training pilots for F-16 fighter jets in order for the Ukrainian troops to be able to fend off Russian aggression, to defend from Russian attacks.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the United States is working with Ukraine and other allies to build consensus around the core elements of a just and lasting peace to end the war with Russia. Speaking during a visit to Finland, the newest member of the NATO alliance, he said Washington would also encourage initiatives by other countries to end the conflict, as long as they upheld the United Nations Charter and Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence.
The United States has been working with Ukraine and allies and partners around the world to build consensus around the core elements of a just and lasting peace. To be clear, the United States welcomes any initiative that helps bring President Putin to the table to engage in meaningful diplomacy. We'll support efforts, whether by Brazil, by China, or any other nation, if they help find a way to a just and lasting peace, consistent with the principles of the United Nations Charter. A just and lasting peace must uphold the UN Charter and affirm the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. A just and lasting peace requires Ukraine's full participation and assent. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. As I've made clear, by virtually every measure, President Putin's invasion of Ukraine has been a strategic failure. The Kremlin often claimed it had the second strongest military in the world, and many believed it. Today, many see Russia's military as the second strongest in Ukraine. Today, America and our allies and partners are helping meet Ukraine's needs on the current battlefield while developing a force that can deter and defend against aggression for years to come. That means helping build a Ukrainian military of the future with long-term funding, a strong air force centered on modern combat aircraft, an integrated air and missile defense network, advanced tanks and armored vehicles, national capacity to produce ammunition, and the training and support to keep forces and equipment combat ready.
And speaking to us further on the subject is our security expert, Temitope Olodo. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, today in Ukraine, the country's military has said that they have taken advances forward. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Now, they've said they've taken advances forward. But what has happened more or less is a kind of an advancement around the eastern aspect area of Ukraine, which of course they've denied because there's this kind of news going around that there's more advances around the east, which even the Russians have more or less alluded to. But within the Ukraine, war machine, there is a bit of a wall of silence. And that is not unusual for security analysts, because we know that they cannot give commentary on the war as it's going on, coupled with the fact that they need to be more strategic in their counter narrative or counter attack, which is upcoming, but which they have, of course, alluded to, could happen today, could happen tomorrow, or could happen next week.
And the opposing side is the Russian military is saying a large-scale movement has, offensive by Ukraine has been prohibited and defended and prevented, and that even Ukraine has lost up to, 250 troops, destroyed armored vehicles. How much truth is there to that claim?
There's no evidence as of now. However, just like the U.S. Defense Secretary has said, there will be some win and there will be some loss. For most security analysts, the belief is that the Ukraine is reserving, their best that they will use. They need to find the weakness in the Russian front line. And of course, most analysts and Europeans that are supporting Ukraine has come to a consensus that Russia is not as strong as they believe they should have been strong. Of course, they still use the rhetoric that Russia is the second most strongest machine, a military machine. The truth is, Russia has been weakened by this war that has started since last year.
Would you say, Temitope, that perhaps this is just an informational war?
Of course, that is the view or perception that Ukraine wants us to believe. But there's no doubt, and just like Ukraine has admitted to, that since the 24th of February, when this offensive or this attack started, Ukraine has been attacking Russia on their territory, and that will continue. What we've not seen is a full-scale counteroffensive, which we've all been waiting for, taking the war back, to Russia. And that is very, very important, because whether we like it or not, Ukraine has been the playground for all the different equipment or the different attacks. It's never really happened on the Russian soil. And that is what we've started to see gradually. And we hope that will happen more, because there's a stall in terms of the war. Nobody's going forward or backward. So the counter attack is what everyone has been waiting for, to see how things will pan out in the future.
And, former U.S. representative for Ukraine, Kurt Volker, mentioned at one point that Ukraine should join NATO. What are your thoughts on that suggestion? Can you see a Ukraine NATO?
It's definitely not going to happen now. I know there is a summit that's coming up in July, and the issue of Ukraine joining NATO has been mooted since 2009, so it's not a new thing. Of course, we've seen the shifting. We know the Americans, we know France and Germany have been on the other side. They've been a bit on the fence on that issue. And that's because, whether we like it or not, Russia is still a superpower. And if Russia feels that there's an encroachment on that part from the West, then this, what we call conflict will not end. And that means my energy bill will continue to rise in the UK, which most people are not happy with, because we've seen that even in Germany, where the chancellor has come out in strong defense of this war, the people have started booing. Europe, there's a bit of resistance to this war going on. Now, how long the rope will continue stretch, nobody knows.
And Temitope, with regards to the West and its role in this, do you feel that they have supported the Ukraine amply with weapons?
They've been a bit reluctant to push the goal forward. But they started by saying, we will not give Ukraine heavy weapons, but they are giving them heavy weapons. They've started with the fact that Ukraine's military cannot, or Air Force cannot handle airplanes, and that will create a bit of a challenge, because Russia must see that, and Russia, of course, threatened that they would see that as being a proxy of the West. But whether we like it or not, Americans are training them now. The British are training them and providing them with those weapons and Air Force. So all the things that they've said are red lines have now been put aside, and they are now going forward. What we don't know is what would be the line that will not be crossed. Will it be that when the nuclear weapons really start landing in Bucharest or the other bits, that at that point, the West will come out publicly? Because whether we like it or not, this is a war fought by the West. It's a proxy war.
Do you buy the argument that the longer the war goes on, the better it will be beneficial for Russia?
Russia has benefited one way or the other from them being able to sell their oil, their currency not being affected. It's made them a bit more independent than they would have been some few years ago when they had the access to credit cards and all those things. And we don't want them to become comfortable to say that, okay, you are fighting this war, but you'll not be adversely affected. One way or the other, this war needs to end. And that's the reason why good people like the Pope, people are calling on the Pope to send a peace summit to go there and try and find a solution. We need to find a solution to this war, because this is affecting the whole world. Cost of living is going up, and we need to find a solution. What the solution will be, we don't know, but we definitely know it's not going to be just the war hard approach. There needs to be a soft approach to find a solution to this war.
All right. Thank you very much, Temitope, security advisor. We appreciate you having on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back. The Vatican has said Italian Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, tasked by Pope Francis to carry out a peace mission to try to help end the war in Ukraine, will visit Kyiv today and tomorrow. Since the war started in February 2022, Pope Francis and the Vatican have tried to offer themselves as possible peace brokers, but to date, their efforts have not been successful. Zuppi hails from the Sant'Egidio community, a Rome-based peace and justice group, which in 1992 brokered a deal that ended the civil war in Mozambique, which had killed approximately 1 million people and displaced about 4. The Pope made him a cardinal in 2019, and he was elected head of the Italian Episcopal Conference just last year. NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg says Sweden has taken significant steps to meet Turkey's concerns over its NATO membership bio. Turkey ratified Finland's NATO accession in March, but objected to Stockholm's bid, saying Sweden harbors members of militant groups it considers terrorists. Stoltenberg met with Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan in Istanbul to discuss the delay to Sweden's membership, among other issues. Stoltenberg said there was still time for Sweden to join the alliance, by the next NATO summit in mid-July.
In my meeting with President Erdogan, I congratulated him on his re-election and on the high turnout among the Turkish people. President Erdogan and I discussed a range of issues that will be on the agenda for next month's NATO summit in Vilnius. We addressed NATO's strong support to Ukraine, work to further bolster our deterrence and defense, and support to Ukraine, and the importance of our presence in Kosovo, and not least the fight against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. We also discussed Sweden's bid for NATO membership. Turkey has legitimate security concerns. No other ally has faced more terrorist attacks. Sweden has taken significant concrete steps to meet Turkey's concerns. This includes amending the Swedish constitution, ending its arms embargo, and stepping up counter-terrorism cooperation, including against the PKK. Important new terrorism legislation has come into force just a few days ago. So Sweden has fulfilled its obligations. I thank Turkey for sending reinforcements to northern Kosovo following the recent unrest. Turkey also contributes to NATO's training of Iraqi forces. It has pre-assigned forces to NATO's multinational battle group in Hungary, and Turkey has given Ukraine strong support, including through leadership of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Both Pristina and Belgrade must take concrete steps to de-escalate the situation and refrain from further irresponsible behavior.